In December, every day from the 1st to the 24th, every faction is getting new rules. This is the biggest rules update to 40k 10th edition since it began. But the good news is, all of the rules are optional. They are detachments, so if you miss them or you don't care because you always plan to sit in your room with a Vanguard spearhead and say "Caca," that is still an option, and I know at least one person will stick to that. This is the Grotmas Calander. Every day new detachments, and from the number of factions, with or without codexes, it is 30 downloads in 24 days. Because Blood Angels and Dark Angels who have a codex are also counted as their own faction, I would expect them to get a detachment. And much like the launch of 10th edition, some factions will have their rules released on the same day. So again, I would expect the Blood Angels and Dark Angels on the same day, Chaos and Imperial Knights on the same day, and the Chaos Demons are getting 4 new detachments that will probably be released on the same day. So what are these detachments? They are not updated versions of current detachments or replacements for existing detachments. They are detachments in addition to the Index or Codex, much like the Dark Eldar Sky Splinter detachment was. These are viable in any way to play basic 40k, so not for combat patrol or boarding actions, but can be used in crusade games, regular games like match play games with equal points, and at tournaments. The points for any enhancements that come with the detachment rule, the new stratagems, they will all appear in the same PDF document. If your codex isn't out yet, this December detachment shouldn't appear in the new codex and will remain as a viable extra detachment. So if you have the beautiful Praetorian Imperial Guard, you have been playing with the Combined Arms Index detachment. Then in December, you will get this second detachment. When the Imperial Guard Astra Militarum Codex comes out with 5 detachments, the Combined Arms Index detachment will be updated and be one of those 5 Codex detachments, but this bonus December detachment will still be a valid extra, bringing them to 6 total detachments. When these are coming out in December, I will cover in detail the Adeptus Sororitas, the Death Watch, and the Genestealer cult, as well as any other armies that take my interest that I have something insightful to talk about. But this is my prediction video, so if I was right about what the Guard get, I can't see the value that you would get from me making another video that says, yes, I was right. It's this flavor. Most of my audience would only be interested in Guard if there are units for Brood Brothers, and they are coming. This is the most Genestealer looking horse I have ever seen. After my big 3 armies have had their extra rules, I will be spending time playtesting the detachments to see what the flaws are and what they really do well. It's only by playing them that YouTubers can give you genuine insight. From doing that, I learned and explained to you all that Xenocreed isn't the Horde style detachment. It is the Advance and Charge detachment. The Army of Faith isn't Miracle Dice on steroids. It is an army that requires you to get more Miracle Dice to use it well. But we will have to wait until they come out in December. We won't be able to sneak peek ahead and see what's coming through something like the Games Workshop 40k app, because the app will only update in January with the new detachments. So any games you play in December will require you to have the PDF of the new detachment to hand. Thinking of updates, this suggests that the balance patch and rules update expected in December may come earlier and be this week. It could be out right now while you're watching this. Unless the earlier releases for this advent calendar are for armies that aren't seeing much change in the balance patch, like Leagues of Votann or Orcs, but the Battle Sisters, Genestealer Cult, Space Marines and Death Watch would surely be released after their rules are changed in the balance patch. So, when a codex has been released, it has felt like there is often a detachment missing in a lot of cases. That there is some archetype playstyle of the faction not there, or a sub-faction like a Space Marine chapter equivalent that doesn't have a good fit for a detachment. Except the Space Marines have a lot of detachments, and they are a good example of what the other factions could have. A fast detachment, a transport detachment, armored combat vehicle detachment, a generalist detachment, defensive shooty detachment, stealthy detachment, and elite unit detachment. If we then look out to the Space Marine sub-factions, Jump Pack Speedy Detachment Blood Angels, Speedy Ravenwing Bike Detachment, Specific Combat Unit Detachment, which focuses around the Death Company, similar to how Biosanctity Brood Surge is combat but focused on aberrants and pure strains. And there is a character-focused detachment from the Space Wolves. Every unit has a place to shine brighter. There are a lot of themes, so if your army is missing one of them, and it would suit your faction playstyle, so no Combat Tau, no stealthy Imperial Knights, that is a detachment you can get. I'm going to look broadly at themes rather than guessing what detachment rules or stratagems could be, but stick with me and I will take your busy mind through what I expect to see for each faction, starting with a channel favourite, the Adeptus Sororitas. The popular look when we talked about this before was, oh, let's get some bloody Rose Battle Sisters, have a very combat-focused detachment. But I don't think they'll go for the Bloody Rose. We have a combat-oriented detachment, the Penitent Host. The Hallowed Martyrs also does really well for combat units. If there is a combat detachment, why would you want to use the Penitent Host when that will limit the number of combat units that are affected by any rule? If you can have combat bonuses for Celestian Sacrosancts and Repentia, why would you pick the detachment that only supports the Repentia? So I'm not predicting a combat detachment themed around the Bloody Rose. I consider a character-focused detachment similar to how the Genestealer Cult Xeno Creed or the Space Wolf Index works. The heroines, the saints, the potential saints are the focus. But the Hallowed Martyrs already has resurrection and characters taking damage to get better, so this as a theme is probably already covered. The Bringers of Flame is the transport detachment. It is almost exactly the same as the Firestorm detachment for the Space Marines. But what about the vehicles that aren't transports? The Penitent Engines, the Castigator, the Exorcist, and the Paragon Warsuits? Well, if we drop the Penitent units and say, no, they stick to the Penitent Host, that still leaves 3 units. So some rerolls for them to encourage players to take the Warsuits without Morven Vaal? Or we go for a more elite focus. The Paragon Warsuits and the Celestian Sacrosancts. Increased objective control for Paragon Warsuits, bonuses to the Celestian Sacrosancts. Maybe on a 4+ you get a Miracle Dice back if you spent one on one of those units. So I'm looking at a theme similar to the First Company Space Marines, the Bully Boys, and maybe the Deathwing. For the banner art, all you need to do is take the 9th edition Codex, and there you go. That is your detachment banner. Oh, and they could bring back Celestians with guns. New unit entry, right there. Celestian Anchoress. Anchoress Celestians. That's like a female hermit. They live alone, they crusade alone, fight in small groups, and you can build them out of the Battle Sister box, so you don't need to have new rules and weapons and have them with cloaks and sniper rifles, even though that would be really awesome. There are multiple downloads coming. It isn't one download per day. With 26 factions, not including Deathwatch, in 24 days, not only are we doubling up on some releases, extra things can be added in. I have faith. Eventually we'll have Celestians. Eventually. Right, moving on to the current home of the Deathwatch, the Imperial Agents, which is also a home to some Battle Sister units. One of the additions I would love to see, here with the detachments, if not for the balance patch, is an army rule for the Imperial Agents. Their army rule as it stands is that they can get hired out for the night to other Imperial factions. Imperial Knights have this as an army rule, and another actual army rule when run as their own faction. I am not asking for the world. It can be a bad rule, like everyone gets a 6+ invulnerable save. And this is an army that already has lots of invulnerable saves, but it would be something. As a detachment for them, an assassin-themed detachment? So the army gets precision on critical hits, and there's a stratagem and an enhancement that gives you critical hits on a 5+ to boost that chance of an attack hitting the enemy character. It could have a stealthy become untargetable stratagem, and give bonuses to the assassins. But what they really need is an anti-tank detachment, a bit like the Bringers of Flame. Increase strength on weapons, or everything becomes anti-vehicle, anti-monster 5+. I would like another generalist detachment. The Imperialis fleet is already skewed towards the Navy units. Like, what if they did an all work together as agents in a single army, cobbled together by an Inquisitor's mandate? The Inquisitorial Strike Force. It could have a basic bonus to everyone, or act like the Custodes Talons of the Emperor. The different units give a bonus to allies in 6 inches. If you're near an Auto Hereticus unit, you get Ignore Cover. If you're near an Auto Xenos unit, reroll wound rolls of 1. Near an Auto Malleus unit, a 5+ Feel No Pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. So in the short time they are together for this one task, the agents of the various sub-factions share knowledge and work to raise the whole group. We are wearing our Get Along jumper. Oh, and one of the stratagems would have to be Orbital Bombardment. But the Deathwatch Index revamp is definitely coming so that we can have an all Deathwatch army and include Space Marine units. That may be the new detachment for the Imperial agents, or that could be a new Space Marine detachment. What will the Space Marines get? Well, if they get all the sub-factions, that's lots of detachments. The Blood Angels and Dark Angels and Black Templars and Space Wolves will probably be separate. They are their own factions, sort of, and with some sort of change to Space Marines coming, there could be a rules change so that if you include something with the Space Wolf, Blood Angels or Dark Angels keyword, you can't take the Codex Space Marine detachments. Right now, if you want Stormlands, you take the Stormlands detachment and then also add in some mounted keyword Thunderwolf Cavalry. So the Space Wolves could get a Thunderwolf Cavalry focused detachment, especially if they're losing access to the Stormlands. But what about the regular Space Marines? We have all of the first founding Loyalist chapters covered. Like I said, Dark Angels are separate from this. And the first company is catered for, and the 10th company is catered for. So what about a Horde Breaker detachment? Crimson Fist themed. They like to fight orcs. They have a lot of experience fighting orcs and a particular hatred of orcs, especially the hordes of orcs. So if you got sustained hits 1 when attacking units with 5+ models, or sustained hits 2 on units of 15+ models, yes, this is just better than the Imperial Agents Auto Hereticus detachment. But these are Space Marines, the poster child of 40k. Of course they're going to get better things. The Black Templars have their Crusade vows already covered, but there could be a specific Crusade goal as a detachment rule. Something not dissimilar to how the Space Wolves operate, because that is a detachment that the Black Templars will not get access to, because you would need to have Space Wolf only units and you can't do that when you also have Black Templar units. Or it would work very much like the army rule of the Imperial Knights, the Code Chivalric. There is something you have to complete to get bonuses for the rest of the game. Control more objectives than the enemy at the end of one battle round, or you have to control the objective in the opponent's deployment zone, or as soon as you kill the enemy warlord, then you get an army-wide bonus that could be very strong. I think that suits the crusading style of the Black Templars. The Blood Angels seem very well served by all of the Space Marine Codex detachments, and 3 of their own. My only guess is if they lose access to the Space Marine detachments, then they would want something from the Space Marines, but recreated for themselves, like the First Company Task Force, but all about their Terminators. They were the Terminators that went into the very first Space Hulk. In the game, Space Hulk. So we may see something themed around Terminators, or we can emphasize the character aspect, where we have characters like Dante and Mephiston, or we can go for a more psychic route, because the Blood Angels have a lot of psychic stuff going on. Having an invulnerable save or feel no pain could represent that. I don't want to go full fate dice. You never go full fate dice. And I've not really got anything for the Dark Angels either. I know they like plasma, but hey, give me plasma doesn't explain much. We have their signature Raven Wing, and we have their Death Wing, and we have an Everyone Else detachment. All I can think is, if the Space Marines lock Dark Angels out of the Codex detachments, another detachment similar to an existing Space Marine one. The Imperial Guard, well, they're getting a Codex, and we know the detachment themes for their coming Codex. The Codex will have 5 detachments. There is the Combined Arms detachment, which we have seen before with the Born Soldiers rule. The infantry fights the enemy infantry, the tanks fight the enemy tanks. It is Cadian themed, or at least Cadia after they are forced off their planet because it's not there anymore, and then they have to team up with other regiments to work together to keep up being an effective fighting force. There is a Siege regiment, which is the artillery themed, and it could have waves of infantry. This is the Krieg detachment. We know that from, the massive siege guns and the way they love trench warfare. So if you want lots of infantry, this could be the way to go. If you want the big artillery pieces like the basilisks and the emplacements, this is your big gun detachment. The mechanized assault detachment is all about fast transports, making them faster, being able to shoot better after disembarking, being able to disembark after advancing, even though it's not a tow rocks. It's the Armageddon Steel Legion style detachment. The Hammer of the Emperor is all tanks. This could represent Talon. They are a tank and light infantry army, but their tanks do massive outflanking maneuvers. Think of like the North Africa campaign in World War II, but they are based on Lawrence of Arabia in World War I. And one of their stratagems is like the Tyranid Crusher Stampede. It's a stratagem that lets you move a tank through terrain. The 5th detachment is the Recon Element detachment. So that could be cavalry, and it could be infantry that like infiltration and stealth, the Tanith First and Only, and the Catachans. Considering the new combat patrol only has an officer with an infantry unit that can already order itself, it has lots of cavalry. A horse detachment is possible when the Death Riders are released with Codex rules instead of separate PDF rules. That would make more sense. But I think the Recon Element detachment will already be covering them. The Mordians and Praetorians do well enough in the Combined Arms detachment as a theme. The Vostrians could be much the same. They are a city fight army, so something that ignores cover is an option. The Talon Light Infantry could be with the Recon Element detachment or the Hammer of the Emperor tank detachment. But the element I think that they will go for with this extra detachment in December is Tempestus Scions. Previously they had their own sub-faction Codex, and that was all about the different Tempestus Scion regiments, how they operate, and giving them their own really cool things. Games Workshop painted up a lot of models in the Tempestus blue, rather than the green colour of the rest of the Imperial Guard to differentiate them. So it could be bonuses for the Tempestus Scions. I would say a stratagem that lets you deep strike 3 inches away, but we have a new Tempestus Scion unit that can do that anyway. But Tempestus Scions seems a safe bet. With the many Imperial Guard regiments, there were a lot of ways to go. With the Adeptus Custodes, it's much more narrow. There are so few units that it makes a theme that isn't covered difficult to pick. We already have Custodes and Sisters of Silence. We have just Sisters. We have just Custodes. And we have a character-focused detachment in the Auric Champions. So I would suggest we focus on their heavier things. At least the heavier things that are in the Codex and not Forge World units. But that could be the Terminators and their tanks. And their Dreadnoughts. That could be the theme. The extra tough stuff. In a faction that is already extra tough. Thinking of Terminators, the Grey Knights could go that way as well. They teleport around. They have a very nice teleporter strike detachment. They fight demons well, but the good fighting against demons is already supplanted in the Imperial Agents Codex. But a detachment focused around the Terminators and Paladin Terminators, I would say something that increases their objective control, but we have banners that do that, or gives them the sticky objectives rule, but there is already a unit in the Grey Knights Codex that does that. But for this, I would think maybe along the themes of the Bully Boys, or the Dark Angels Deathwing detachment. These could be auras, so the rest of the army gets better if they're fighting near Terminators, something that encourages you to take Terminators and the Terminators work better. The Adeptus Mechanicus has a few combat units, but I'm not seeing a detachment that is very combat unit themed. They could stick to that, and then the Electro Priests especially would get better in close combat. But after the very weird release at the start of the edition for the AdMech where they seemed like the weakest army, and then 6 months later were confirmed to be the weakest army, and then 6 months after that they had a revamp to work better despite their codex, I haven't played against AdMech more than once in the last year and a half. So I'm a little out of what the AdMech can do. If there already is a very good combat attachment or one suitable for combat, I'm not the person who's going to know. But combat could be the theme. The Imperial Knights have an army rule about completing specific deeds, and they have a detachment rule that's very general. It gives them a feel no pain to keep them around. A little bit of toughness. We could see a House Raven style detachment. They get to advance and charge. They get to advance and still shoot. Speed is the whole focus. Or we could go for something that's a bit more about fighting enemy titans. And, you know, monsters and vehicles, and generally the other Chaos Knights that are existing in the galaxy. So a House Crust theme, you have lethal hits on your melee attacks, but when you're fighting something Titanic or a monster and vehicle, let's say, just to make it more general, then you get lethal hits triggering on a 5+ instead of a 6+. The Chaos Knights are of course the other side of that coin, but I'm thinking of something different for the Chaos Knights. Just accept the situation as it is in the meta and make the War Dogs better. The Little Knights get higher OC and or get sticky objectives. It sounds horrible, but it may come with a points increase. When you can make the thing that's already good even better, it's gonna get hit with increased points. The Chaos Demons we know a lot more about. There are gonna be 4 detachments, 1 for each god. That suggests that this right now is going to be a trial run of rules before, in the future, they get split into their Chaos Legion Codex. This is how it works in Age of Sigmar. A mix of mortals and plague demons are the Maggotkin of Nurgle. That 40k Codex could have its own detachment for Plague Marines of the Death Guard, 1 for the Chaos Demons to be better, and 1 or 2 with a mix of the demon and mortal aspect together. With the Emperor's Children Codex coming out, this will be the first time in many editions that the 4 legions dedicated to one god have their own range and rules. When that split happens, if that split happens, I think that Be'lakor will appear in each of their books in the same way that Nagash has appeared in the Vampire and the Ghost and the Skeleton and the Ghoul army books. For now, Chaos Demons will get rules for each god, but probably any demon can be in any detachment, just so the codex works. The limit will be that they won't get the detachment bonus or be affected by like 5 out of 6 of the stratagems. So your all Tzeentch demon army can still have a unit of Nurglings. Those Nurglings won't benefit from the detachment rule, but they can still be included in that detachment. Also for now, while they are separate, what new detachments will the 4 legions get? The Emperor's Children aren't out yet, so I expect they will get nothing. They have no detachment at the moment, and I can't see that changing until they actually have a codex. The Death Guard could go the Typhus Plague Zombie route, have more things for the Poxwalkers, the Cultists, the Spawn, the auxiliary things of the Death Guard. Or they can go for the more armoured siege style. The vehicles get tougher and or shoot better, sort of like the Fellhammer Siege Force or the Demon Engine version that Vashtor loves. For the Thousand Sons, I know it, you know it, the unloved aspect of the Thousand Sons, the Zangors. They are Chaos Beastmen from Warhammer Fantasy that worship Tzeentch and have no clear origin in 40k. They just rock up, refuse to elaborate on who they are or why they are here, but they deserve their own detachment. It would be a bit of a meme detachment, just one odd thing lots of times, but the Chaos Cult and the Kroot detachments exist and do pretty well. The Zangors have their own leaders, the Zangor Shaman. They are a viable army without the need for any Rubric Marines. Add in the Cultists and the Spawn and maybe the Mutilith Vortex Beast, and you have a detachment. Don't talk to me about Scarab Occult Terminator detachments. Come on, eat up your Zangors like a good kid. For the World Eaters, I expect them to focus more on their heavy hitters. I mean, they're all heavy hitters, but specifically the 8-bound and the Terminators. This could be called the Red Butcher detachment, even though we don't have special rules for Terminators that are the Red Butchers. But 8-bound, Exalted 8-bound, and World Eaters Terminator squads could get better. Stratagems along the lines of giving their attacks +1 damage, and letting them fight on death would be very much on theme. The Chaos Space Marines, generally, that codex, it has a detachment for all of the different major legions, and yet the word bearers are not well represented. The detachment that has their picture is all about pledging a unit to one specific god. Famously, the word bearers all worship every god, so the Pact-bound Zealots is not that suitable. Their love is possessed, so a detachment that makes possessed and spawn and some of the demon engines better could show off the monster aspect of the Chaos Space Marines. There could be better obliterators included as well. But we've already used the word bearers and possessed in banner art, so who do we have on the banner art? Why, it's Fabulous Bill and his wonderful pimp stick. He's gonna make a new man out of you. And the whole creations of bile aspect really plays into it, even though I'm still thinking of this as the word bearers detachment. Any unit that's kind of freaky and doesn't already get a bonus elsewhere would be well suited to this style of detachment. And those are the Chaos ones, assuming the Emperor's Children don't get their first detachment to try them out. That would be something special. But killing the Emperor's Children, now that we can see one's body with a single piece of boob armor, we have the Aeldari of the Craft Worlds. Knowing what an extra detachment for the Aeldari will be is difficult because we don't know what's in the Codex. Unlike the Imperial Guard who gets 5 detachments, the Codex Aeldari will have 8 detachments. The All-Rounder War Host, the Seer Council, which is like Ulthwi, which is the detachment that will have Fate Dice, while every other detachment will lose the Fate Dice. The Windrider Host of the Siam Han, which is all about the bikes and speed. The Harlequin's Ghost of the Webway. The Devoted of Ynir, and there will be Kabbalite Warriors and other Dark Eldar units in the Aeldari Codex. Whether they get to be used outside of the Devoted of Ynir or not, we don't know. The Baal-Tan of the Swordwind should like the Aspect Host, which is about the Aspect Warriors and the Avatar of Cain. You can guarantee there will be an Iyanden-style Wraith detachment. And the last one will likely be Alitok themed, based around the Path of the Outcast, the Rangers, and also the Corsairs. So that doesn't leave us with a lot. But we could take a cue from the boarding actions and have a Guardian-focused army. This can represent the Craft Worlds, especially Craft World Ulthwé, who doesn't have a lot of Aspect Warriors and relies on Guardian Militia to field their armies. This can also be a detachment based around the vehicles. The Viper, the Wave Serpent, the Falcon, the Fire Prison, the Warwalker, all of these have Guardian pilots. It could be big unmechanized with transports, or a bit of a tank focus with something extra nice for the Storm Guardian and Guardian Defenders units. The Dark Eldar, the Drukhari, are already well covered as their main working tactic of transports is the Sky Splinter Assault detachment. Having a bit of everything detachment in the Real Space Raiders is also there. So the logical place is to have a detachment that focuses on one of the 3 elements of their society. The Kabbalites, the Witch Cults, and the Homunculus Covens. So a detachment based on one of them. That is a detachment that may end up getting updated in their codex if it takes a long time for that codex to come out. I think Games Workshop would prefer to do an update instead of, say, having the Witch Cult detachment not appear in the codex and new players have to find it online. For the Orcs, the Goths are overrepresented, at least that's how they feel. They are the poster boys of the boys, so they suit the Warhorde. They love waves of lads rushing the enemy, so Green Tide suits that clan. And they really do have the biggest boys, like Ghazghkull, so the Bully Boys matches them too. This leaves a lot of clans that are not represented. A shooting detachment for the Bad Moons? You could get sustained hits 2 on your shooting attacks. It means more shots generally, even if your gun already had sustained hits 1. It's a bit like the Warhorde, but it's shooting, and we know that Orcs hit on a 5+ with shooting and a 3+ in combat. There could be enhancements about having weird guns on your big mechs. Some special gun for a big mech with a shock attack gun that fires a special kind of snotling. For Christmas, the gift is snotlings. All the snotlings, but inside of your armor. The Blood Axes, that are the sneaky Orcs, don't have many options that suit them beyond taking lots of commandos, or Beast Snagger Boys and then using the Stalking Tactic stratagem. But that's about it. Neither are the Freebooter Pirates well represented as an Orc army. The Orcs have a lot of places they can expand for detachment theme, just based on the clans. And I would love a meme detachment for Gretchen led by the Red Gobbo and a revolutionary committee. It would suit the Grotmas Calander idea. But the Dread Mob has us covered with Killer Cans and Gretchen as a battle line unit. For the Necrons, can I say Catan as a detachment? The points would go up for the Catan so that much like the Repentia of the Adeptus Sororitas, it is rarely worth taking them outside of their dedicated detachment. That's the sort of future I'm hoping for. Suddenly, then the Catan can receive enhancements in this detachment. They lose that rule that stops them, and you can specialize the Transcendent Catan to represent various lost gods. I like that idea. The Tyranids have detachments focused around the consumption of a world, not necessarily hive fleets. Jormungandr could be a stealthy detachment so that your units always get the benefit of cover, bearing in mind that a lot of tournament boards especially, everyone gets the benefit of cover anyway. But we have stealthy and hiding and things focused on the different phases of consumption. But then the Lictors and the Genestealers are High Fleet Kraken. High Fleet Kraken loves them the most. The Invasion Swarm is Leviathan, the Crusher Stampede is Behemoth, the Gaunt Horde is Hydra, and the Psychic stuff is Kronos. Though they could also expand into an artillery theme. That is part of Kronos, and then the Biovores and the Exocrines and the Tyrannofexes could become better. Or you can pick High Fleet Gorgon. They are the plaguey fleet that menace the Tau. They could have a sort of Death Guard army rule aura representing the spores that come off their models. And following the detachment theme of it's about the consumption of a world, this could represent the remnants of a world just before or after final consumption. There are spores that break down life to be inhaled when the rest of the atmosphere gets sucked up by the fleets. The Tau could have a Farsight Enclave specific detachment, so no Ethereals allowed. Just this detachment cannot have Ethereals. And then you would mix in some parts of the Mont'ka, which is about the short blade, getting your units close and shooting there, and the Retaliation Cadre, which is all about the battlesuits. Farsight loves his battlesuits. Or the Tau could try and integrate the auxiliary units more. This is on theme for the Dal'Eth Sept. There is a separate rule for the Kroot detachment, but that didn't go so well after the reinforcements was made once per game, and you can only stop shooting outside of 18 inches. So a detachment that integrated the Kroot and the Vespids and gave them the rule for the greater good. You could enhance the army special rule along those lines. If an auxiliary unit shoots at an enemy unit, and then Tau units follow up, then the Tau units get even more bonuses than they already would from the greater good. This would integrate the auxiliaries into the army instead of having them sit out at the side. And with the new Vespid models, Games Workshop may want to be pushing this ideal. So the Dal'Eth Sept isn't just using or disposing of auxiliaries, it's making them a key part of the army. The Leagues of Votann don't have much lore, as they were around for a very short time in 9th edition, and then they have an index detachment only in 10th edition so far. That index detachment is very basic and general to the army theme. So a focus on vehicles is an obvious option, they're 2 vehicles, but transport focus could also work, with extra bonuses for the bikes, go fast and transport. Or the alternative is to follow the boarding patrol and have Einherr Hearthguard get a bonus. And our final faction to think about is the Genestealer cult. For the Genestealer cult, I think there is a place for all our units to perform better. A problem for the detachments is that they are almost all focused on a few units that you have to super specialize your army into to make any real use of them. Each of the detachments matches a major cult from the last 2 editions. The Twisted Helix has the Mad Science and Monsters, the Rusted Claw rides around Mad Max style, the Pauper Princess sends wave after wave of infantry to protect their characters, and that is what the rules for Xenocreed are. The Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor is the poster cult, the basic cult, and they love coming from underground. Their first discovered cult was all miners. As in, they worked in a mine, not an army of children. The Host of Ascension is their theme. The Hive cult is the cult that infiltrates the military, and wouldn't you know it, there is a detachment for cultists and brood brothers within the Imperial military called the Brood Brothers. That only leaves the Bladed Cog, the detachment that was almost obviously missed from the Codex. That cult infiltrates the Adeptus Mechanicus. They have slightly better equipment than other cults, and all their models in the past edition had a 6+ invulnerable save. Not a bad detachment rule for an army with an average 5+ save. This could be a shooting detachment. The Host of Ascension does a lot of shooting well, but a detachment that is defensive and shooty could work. But the obvious way to go is Brood Brothers, but swap the Imperial Guard for Admech. But I hope they don't. Half an army and another half an army doesn't operate well. And it seems like they're saying, okay, Imperial Guard, would you like to try Genestealer Cult? Okay, Admech, would you like to try some Genestealer Cult? And we'll up the number of Genestealer Cult players by proxy. But it doesn't work great on the table. We have seen that with the Brood Brothers detachment. Skitarii can be turned and become Brood Brothers, but it is hard and it is rare. Usually with the Bladed Cog, the workers are rising up against the Tech Priests, but the workers have access to the same horrible weapons as their overlords. So you could take a more Wreckers sabotage approach. That could be the theme. Let the Reductus Saboteur have an enhancement that only they can take. And the last option is a much requested detachment. Something that Games Workshop might go, oh yeah, people want that, so we'll do it. Combine the Genestealer cult and the Tyranids in a Star Gods Cometh detachment. Games Workshop has been pushing that a lot more in White Dwarf recently with articles about combining the two armies with teamwork. Here is how it can work in a separate video. Ah yes, I didn't really explain what the Deathwatch detachment could be. That depends on what the changes made to them are, and that has a dedicated video for you to explore. My darlings and viewers, have a great month with Detachment December in 40k.